Gentleman yields. I think we've covered everyone. Mr. Ranking Member, you're recognized for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to associate myself with Mr. Garcia's statement. I can't believe that we would send somebody or anyone from our country somewhere else and say, well, we cut off all communication. We're a better country than that.
Let's talk about what went down between Ranking Member Benny Thompson and Secretary Kristi Noem, because this closing statement wasn't just a summary. It was a full-on indictment of the way DHS has been operating under her leadership.
I just thank Mr. Garcia for raising that question. Secretary Noem, at the start of this hearing, you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Then you sat down and dodged the truth over and over and over for a little more than 3 hours, so help you God. You repeatedly testified that you and the Department of Homeland Security will follow the Constitution, the laws, and the order of the Supreme Court. Well, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And yet, a federal court found that the Department of Homeland Security, under your watch, believes that it has a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process. So you did not tell the truth to this committee today when you said you would follow the Constitution and comply with due process. You also testified that you follow orders of the Supreme Court of the United States and all courts. But the Supreme Court unanimously directed the government to facilitate the return of Kilmar Garcia to the United States. But you just testified before this committee that Kilmar Garcia will never return to the United States. So you didn't tell the truth to this committee again when you said that you comply with court orders and decisions. You've overseen the deportation of U.S. citizen children and have claimed that their parents chose to take their children with them. But you produce no evidence that the mother, let alone both parents, of those children freely gave consent to have their children deported from the United States. In fact, everyone involved in those cases say that the mothers, in fact, did not want their children, especially their sick American children, deported. In fact, your agency lured families to ICE appointments under false pretenses, lied to them, refused to let them speak with an attorney or children's father, and deported them before a court had time to even hear the case. You've given yourself the unilateral right to deport anyone you deem a threat. You refuse to comply with court orders that try to stop you. That puts all of us at risk. Beyond your false testimony about the administration's deportation policies, you falsely stated that the administration is focused on a full range of DSH's missions. Instead, your budget request appears to reflect a view that DHS's sole purpose is to be a border wall construction agency that deports U.S. citizen children with cancer. Your budget proposed cuts to cybersecurity, emergency preparedness, and aviation security. Even before asking Congress for these budget cuts, you've overseen mass reductions in the workforce at CISA and FEMA. Despite repeated requests from this committee on how many people have been fired or have been bullied into quitting before their tenure, DHS has refused to share that information. So it should worry every American that we do not know how many people are left at FEMA to respond to disasters and how many cyber defenders still work at CISA as China and other adversaries attack our systems every day. And you made clear in response to my questioning, you have no written plans for FEMA. It is very apparent that also is no plan for CISA, where you are trying to gut the agency's funding and falsely claiming that CISA is a censorship agency. Since CISA never censored anyone, but now we are all paying the price for you buying into a baseless conspiracy theory. Secretary Noem, I'm glad that you finally came to testify before this committee, but I'm disappointed, along with a lot of my Democratic colleagues, that you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, then repeatedly failed to do so to this committee. Let me just say, if you dance with the devil long enough, he's liable to follow you home. I hope that you will stop dancing around the truth and start telling the truth so this committee can do its work, helping to defend DHS from the attacks you've launched against it. Mr. Chair.
So the clip kicks off right after the gentleman yields time, and Thompson gets the floor for his closing. And right out of the gate, you can feel it. This isn't going to be a polite wrap-up with a couple of platitudes. Thompson is angry, but it's a calm, focused anger. The kind you only hear from someone who has sat through hours of evasions and has finally had enough. He starts by associating himself with Representative Garcia's remarks, specifically the shock that the U.S. would send someone abroad and then completely cut off communication. As Thompson says, we're a better country than that. That's the tone setter. Values, responsibility, and moral clarity. And from there, the gloves come off. Thompson reminds Secretary Noem that she took an oath at the start of the hearing to tell the truth, the whole truth. And then he lays out how she spent the next 3 hours dodging it, over and over and over. He uses her own statements against her. She said DHS follows the Constitution. She said DHS respects the courts. She said DHS complies with due process. And then he lists example after example showing that none of that is actually happening. He brings up the Fifth Amendment, due process, and points out that a federal court literally found DHS had stashed away residents of this country in foreign prisons with no due process. That's not a gray area. That's not a policy debate. That's Constitutional Law 101. Then he moves on to the Supreme Court, unanimous, by the way, ordering that Kilmar Garcia be returned to the United States. Yet Noem testified that Garcia will never be allowed to return. You can hear the disbelief in Thompson's voice as he recounts this. It's not just a disagreement, it's a direct contradiction of the highest court in the country. Then there's the part that hits hard emotionally. The deportation of U.S. citizen children, including sick children, with DHS claiming the parents chose to take them, while providing zero evidence that the parents actually consented. And Thompson emphasizes that everyone involved in those cases says the opposite. The mothers didn't want their kids deported. Worse, DHS allegedly lured families to ICE appointments under false pretenses, refused to let them speak to a lawyer, and deported them before courts could even hear the cases. Thompson calls it what it is, a unilateral power grab. Next, he shifts to the budget, accusing Noem of treating DHS like a border wall construction crew instead of a multi-mission national security agency. He points out that while she was focused on deportations and wall building, she proposed cuts to cybersecurity, emergency preparedness, aviation security, some of the most essential modern national security functions we have. And he makes it clear, even before the budget proposals, Noem presided over massive workforce reductions at CISA and FEMA. He notes that DHS hasn't even disclosed how many people are left in these agencies. Think about that. Congress doesn't know how many FEMA workers are available during disasters. In a country dealing with wildfires, hurricanes, floods, cyber attacks. That's not a small oversight. Then Thompson hits her again on CISA, pushing back against her claim that it was some kind of censorship agency. He calls it what it is, a conspiracy theory. And according to him, it's a conspiracy theory that's now putting the country at risk. By the time he reaches the end, the message is unmistakable. Noem didn't tell the truth. She evaded responsibility. She weakened DHS. And the country is less safe because of it. And finally, he closes with a line that's going to stick with people. If you dance with the devil long enough, he's liable to follow you home. It's old-school Southern rhetoric, sharp, poetic, and directed squarely at Noem's political choices. When you take a step back from the intensity of Thompson's delivery, what really stands out is the pattern he outlines, one where basic constitutional obligations seem optional, where Supreme Court rulings can be brushed aside, and where enforcement-first politics outrank humanitarian realities. And whether people lean left, right, or somewhere in between, there's something uncomfortable about the idea of an agency as powerful as DHS operating without transparency or accountability. Thompson's statement isn't just about the specific cases he mentioned. It's about what happens when government leaders decide that due process is an inconvenience instead of a requirement. It's about the erosion of trust when court orders can be contradicted publicly, as if legality is a matter of preference. It's about families, real families, caught in the machinery of a political agenda that views everything through the lens of security, even when the actions taken don't actually make the country safer. And beyond the constitutional concerns, Thompson highlights something else that's easy to overlook. National security isn't just about border walls and deportations. It's about cybersecurity at a time when adversaries attack our infrastructure daily. It's about FEMA being fully staffed when floods or fires obliterate communities. It's about having a homeland security strategy that actually reflects all the threats we face, not just the ones that score political points. This hearing was a reminder that leadership in an agency, as sprawling and consequential as DHS, isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about prioritizing the right things, respecting the courts, and understanding that the Constitution applies even when it's inconvenient. Thompson's frustration came from seeing those principles stretched past their breaking point. At the end of the day, what he delivered was not just a rebuke of Kristi Noem's testimony, but a warning about what happens when powerful institutions drift away from their mission and lose sight of the people they're supposed to protect. His final words weren't just metaphor. They were a call to recognize the cost of aligning with extremist narratives and sidelining the rule of law. And that's why this moment matters, because hearings aren't just theater, they reveal the values guiding the people in charge. And Thompson wanted the public to understand exactly what those values looked like under this leadership, and what's at stake if no one pushes back. If you want more breakdowns of congressional moments like this, don't forget to like, comment, and hit subscribe.